What's going on? It's your boy DameSmiff, and this evening we're going to talk about why hip hop, entertainment, and most things in life are not necessarily a young man's game. And we're going to center it around music, but it's more so about the age bracket and maturity. So if you're interested in conversations like this, make sure you hit the like button so that way other people can find this content, and make sure you hit the subscribe button so that way you can be up to date on my latest videos. So, what inspired this video? Essentially, I've noticed a lot of conversations about dating dynamics, working dynamics, people getting in and out of different careers and things like that. And something that always comes up is age and maturity. And I seem to always come to the same conclusion that a lot of people don't necessarily understand or have a high standard for what they consider acting your age. So I'll give you a quick example, and then we'll go through some of the things I've taken notes on to kind of explore my perspective on age in the entertainment industry. So one of the examples was like, if you're involved in, like, let's say age gap dating or something like that, a lot of people will assume that the younger person in the relationship is, underdeveloped, immature, doesn't know what's going on, or is being taken advantage of. And then on the other hand of it, on the opposite spectrum, some people would say that the older person is being taken advantage of and doesn't know what's going on. So that leads me to the conclusion that no one knows what's going on or have some kind of standard of what you should be behaving as at a certain age. And in another sense, you can do the same thing when it comes to, a lot of legal things that we can do at certain ages: voting, driving, um, signing contracts, paying rent, all these different things, traveling. We have age limits and standards of maturity that involve a lot of these decisions and processes, but it seems like there is a gray area in what we deem to be acceptable across the board. So I do want to explore some notes that I have here. And essentially, it's just going to kind of explore a bit of the things that are factual about turning, we'll pick a random number, about turning the age 25. And the reason I picked 25 because this is around the age where people, start to treat you like a general adult, but also it's that age that I've noticed a lot of people still consider to be immature and to give a lot of grace. But in the following 5 years of this person's life, they would be considered mature and have needed to be um, fully aware of the world around them. So it's very interesting how that gray area right there is exponentially misunderstood by a lot of us. So we're going to understand it a little better together. That way we can be on the same page as an audience. So one of the first things we're going to look into is like, what does it really, you know, mean or look like to be a 25-year-old in the United States today? So typically, like I said, a lot of people give 25-year-olds a bunch of grace, like, oh, you're just 25, you got a lot of life to live. But if we were to consider like the actions of 20 something year olds in America, it's very I would say unhinged. We don't have a lot of barriers, borders, or guidelines on what that looks like. So many people in their 20s are doing a variety of things that don't necessarily get the similar results that we claim we want when we are all having the conversation about getting older or building lives and things like that. So people be like, I want to have a family, kids, and live in a certain place and do what I want and have freedoms and stuff like that. But then when you're in your 20s and you're committing crimes, or you're making bad decisions, or you're not eating well, or you're taking drugs and stupid stuff like that, you're hindering the thing that you say you want. You're hindering your chances to get the thing you say you want. So we're going to take a look at kind of why that happens and why we look at 25-year-olds the way we do and what capabilities they have. So one of the first things it says here in my notes, because I was really trying to explore why we look at 25 the way they do, but it says while 18 is the legal age of adulthood in most United States, research suggests that the human brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions like reasoning and decision making, continues to develop until around age 25. This scientific understanding contributes to the idea that individuals in their early to mid 20s are still undergoing significant maturation. So, in a very simple way, they're simply saying that when you're going through, let's say, puberty or growth spurts, typical biological growths and upgrades that Mother Nature brings you, right? There is a point where we've realized over time that around the age 25 is where most people start to kind of make rational decisions or decisions that are a little more layered than like, what do I want to eat today, or do my friends like me? Like, it starts to get a little deeper, like, where do I want to be in 10 years, or how should the world work? Like, you start to ask yourself different questions right then. And so from my understanding, I'll give my perspective on this. I think that because of that, I would say, discovery of research or conclusion in research, it has led to kind of a watered down change in culture. Whereas people started to take the information and apply the information instead of applying the world around them, or applying what they know of the world already in addition to the new information. So, what do I mean by that? It would be like if somebody told you, I don't know, chocolate ice cream tastes really, really good and strawberry ice cream tastes really, really bad. And then one day you meet somebody eating strawberry ice cream and they look like they enjoy it. If at that moment you just tell yourself they like nasty ice cream and just move on, that's like surface level thinking. If at that moment you tell yourself, oh, well, I must have been lied to, strawberry ice cream must be great, that is still surface level thinking. What they're suggesting here is that there is a certain point of maturation or maturity that a person will then go, well, if chocolate ice cream tastes good and I have tasted it and know it, and this person is enjoying strawberry ice cream and I haven't tried it, maybe there's something going on here. And that line of reasoning can go anywhere, right? But the fact that you even want to make that, kind of a thing to think about means that you are thinking a little deeper than, just surface level thinking of I like or I don't like. You're starting to consider whys and whens, whos, and things like that. Very, very layered questions will come to your mind. Now, science is suggesting that that comes from, just biological maturation, but we have seen in real life, this is what I mean by like looking at the real world. We have seen in real life people a lot younger than 25 making very, very, mature decisions or very reasonable and rational decisions, which doesn't prove it to be, wrong. It just proves that there is possibilities, right? And so this is just a good understanding that, okay, right around 25 is usually when most people generally will start making deeper decisions for their lives. So, does that mean, using our brain, that anybody under 25 is incapable? So I'll let you answer that in the comments. But the notes continue to say that another reason people think that 20 something year olds are young is that compared to previous generations, young Americans are reaching traditional life milestones later. Pew Research Center data indicates that the average age for first marriage, having a first child, and buying a home has increased. For example, the median age for first marriage in 2024 was around 30 for men and 28 for women, significantly later than in 1974. So it's 2025 by the time I'm recording this video. So if it was a lot lower, let's say like almost 60 years, then you got to think that there must have been a cultural change, because it's not that we discovered that 25-year-olds make reasonable decisions better than 18-year-olds and then suddenly we just started behaving differently biologically. No. What happened was we realized that 25-year-olds make better decisions, but then we culturally use that information to shape when we want to get married. So it didn't change the facts of, you know, how you mature as an adult, but it did change how you looked at an adult. And that's kind of the important part when you do hear people talk about um, hip hop is a young man's game, or anything that has to do with age. There is a context there that you have to be aware of, that about 50, 60 years ago, culturally, at least in America, we deemed mature decisions to just be mature decisions. There wasn't really a you're too young for that kind of conversation unless you were literally a child, like if you were 13 or something, right? And so one of the next notes I have here is that American culture often glorifies youth and beauty with a strong emphasis on independence and personal exploration. This is something I noticed when I was growing up, and it kind of bothered me not in a bad way, but it kind of like didn't sit right with me because I was a at the time when I was realizing this, I was probably in middle school, and I was a single kid, only child. I don't know why I said single, only child, and I didn't really have a lot of friends that were in groups. I had a lot of individual friends. So I would have maybe, let's say, two friends from math class, and then like one friend from PE, and then I got my two friends from my neighborhood, right? So we didn't all really hang out together in one group. So our identities were kind of disjointed. So I may have hung out with this person because they had cool toys, hung out with this person because they played basketball really well, and I hung out with this person because they were just, a really good friend or just, fun to be around. But what I started to realize was that um, we're not growing together because of that. So I didn't have a clique. And I did start to realize that same information when I noticed other people having groups of friends. So remember there was a group of friends I had in college. These were dancers for the marching band. And they generally stuck together for a long time for most of their college careers. After college, they, still hung out and stuff like that. But you could see how them being so together in the beginning helped develop the growth. So they weren't really a focus on being young, staying young, and honestly being, beautiful and things like that. It was more so an emphasis on growth and, exploring life and things like that. So when this says that American culture often glorifies youth and beauty, I see that a lot in people who are not really socially immersed. Like I felt this way where like, maybe I have to be better. Maybe I have to be a more attractive person to get more friends until I started to realize what it really meant to be a friend. And it was had nothing to do with youth and beauty. And because of this, I think a lot of people start to really think that younger people have, more fun, they're more social, they're just enjoying life better, but that's not necessarily true based on what we've seen before where excuse me, based on what we talked about before, where you could be under 25 making really, really mature decisions. And it also continues to say with a strong emphasis on independent and personal exploration. And so the independence part sticks out to me because I think a lot of people, when they're considering, well, I'm young and I get to do whatever else, that part right there is dangerous for younger people because there isn't really a result that they can rely on for their own life to glean from, to really use as an example. So, what does that mean? So, that means if you want to be a musician like me and you want to just be the greatest, there would have to be some kind of example for you to learn from, to glean from, to really gather information to know what steps to take. So, that could be another musician, that could be a parent, that could be your religion, your culture. But if there's an emphasis, meaning a push for on you being independent, that means you will almost have nothing to rely on, nothing to glean from, or only pieces and little tattered pieces of scripture and things like that that you're using to build up what honestly has no foundation of an adult. So when you do that, along with it says an emphasis on personal exploration, you will begin exploring things about yourself that aren't necessarily beneficial. And this is where we go back to the 25-year-old being able to make reasonable, more executive functions. If you are focusing on your independence and personal exploration young and you have no experience, meaning your parents didn't, take you out the country, you don't talk to a lot of people, your whole life has been school, social media, and your immediate family, you're not really going to be exploring much other than what, negative things you may have in your life or the little bit of positive things. So you really have to go into life as a young person willing to build and discover along alongside glorifying your youth and beauty, because it's not necessarily going to hurt you to be independent, but it's helpful to understand how dependence works so that way it's not scary when you need to be. But my notes continue to say this also can lead to a prolonging of the young adult phase, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, where you will find yourself exploring exploring things like love, loneliness, sadness, and things like that by yourself. And it'll take you longer to get over these things because you don't have any examples of what it means to be honestly a successful, stable, reasonable adult. And it says, it can lead to a prolonging of the young adult phase where individuals are expected to focus on education, career building, and self discovering before fully embracing traditional adult responsibilities. And that's exactly what I'm explaining. You'll find yourself doing things because you're sad, you're wearing certain clothes, because you're lonely and the kids at school picked on you, you're acting a certain way with your attitude. And all through this, you still need to focus on your education, career building, and things like that, which has nothing to do with your social responsibilities as an adult, meaning keep your hands to yourself, watch your mouth, respect people, all these things like that. You haven't necessarily needed to master to get a grade, to get a paycheck. And so, this is kind of why people look at 25-year-olds who were making mistakes and give them grace to the detriment. They give them grace to their detriment because they think in their mind that, oh, they will eventually figure it out, which delays the answer they need to a lot of the questions they have in their lives. Like, how does credit work? How does taxes work? And all these things. These are traditional adult responsibilities that don't necessarily get mastered because they don't have to be until they need to be. And the next note I have here is that there are economic realities such as student loan debt, rising housing costs, and a more competitive job market can also contribute to a delay in financial independence and traditional adult markers, leading individuals to live at home longer or postpone major life commitments. So this was something um, I've dealt with, and I still see a lot of people my age dealing with, but well, I'll kind of break down some of the things that are said here. So economic realities such as student loan debt is a common one, but it honestly goes back to the maturation of, let's say, a 25-year-old, 20 something year old, right? When you are in school and things like that, there is information that's being presented to you. Like, you need to go to school, you need to go to college and get a job. How that works is not necessarily up to you culturally. Culturally, we have parents, teachers, organizations that will help you get a student loan and get you into school with the idea that you going to school, putting your best foot forward, will get you the results of, let's say, a good job or a good income, right? But again, if you were to take our now 30 something year old brains, and if you're 40, you're watching this, or 50-year-old watching this, you know a little better. You know that if you're going to get a loan, what's expected of you. You know that if once you get a loan, that there are, a few more things to consider outside of just receiving the money and paying it back, right? So that's a part of why this economic reality is a factor for younger people, because this is just a common decision we typically make. We'll just go and get a loan for school, and oftentimes we don't have a plan to pay it back, or the maturation needed to pay back a 4 to 5 digit loan is not being practiced before we get the loan, so we don't have the muscle memory and the ability, honestly, to pay it back, so we wind up asking for help or getting further into debt. The next one is rising housing costs. So I don't think this one has much to do with age other than maybe just bad timing, right? So right now our housing situation is that most of the houses in America are just too expensive. It's not that there's not enough. It's just for what people are asking for the value that people are getting, it's not matching. So I don't think that's necessarily an age thing other than because most of us have not started maybe building wealth younger. That could play a role. But I think culturally that's not so much age. And then the last one is a more competitive job market. So this one I think really does deal with age, because like I said, if you're 25 or you think 25 is young and things like that, there are probably skills you haven't practiced or are aware of that make you valuable in the job market. So I see a lot of people my age, I'm 32, and when I was like 26, 27, a lot of people, they were like, I want to make a lot of money, be a business owner, and do all this stuff. But when I would go to work at like a 9 to 5 or something like that, the 19, 20, 22 year olds, they just had this kind of like very, not lazy attitude, but it wasn't urgent. Like there was no like when I get off of work, I'm going to do this, or I'm here at work so I can do this. There was none of that. It's kind of like I'm taking it day by day, just chilling. And because of that, they're not really understanding that, all right, when you go into your restaurant job as a waiter, this is an opportunity for you to build up social skills, selling skills, as well as just understanding people better, like empathy and things like that. You can understand people's stories, and also you can learn money. So if you're handling, cash constantly, repetitively, all the time, the numbers will start to stick. You'll start to feel a little more confident dealing with money. But if you never do that, it's gonna feel like the job is stressful. You don't know what you're doing, and you probably will fail and do things wrong more times than not. And I think this is kind of plays a contributing factor into people seeing that in 25-year-olds and early 30-year-olds and then giving them grace and thinking that's normal. And so they'll continue to kind of fail and be mediocre and then still not meet the mark and wonder why they're not, because we aren't setting kind of like a standard for them to understand this is what you need to be doing and this is how it looks. And we also have to be the example as well. So there are a lot of people who just hate their jobs. That doesn't help either. But the last thing I have here, as far as why we view 25-year-olds the way we do, is that there are perceptions of old that may be a little misconstrued. So as life expectancy increases, the definition of old has shifted. With many people living well into their 80s and beyond, 25 is increasingly viewed as being very early in the overall lifespan, which personally I think is foolish for a bunch of reasons, but I'll give you a few. One, just because the life expectancy in general for humans are going up doesn't mean you get to experience it. I was born in 1992. There are a lot of people born that year that aren't here that should be here. So we all might not make it to 80. So we're not going to consider 25 young because 80 is possible. And then the other thing is that there again, your lifestyle and your culture to me dictates the, I guess, how thriving your life is. Like if I lived 80 years of trash, I don't think it's worth saying, my 25-year-old birthday was great because I was young and had a lot of energy. It was still one of the trash 80 years. So I think that kind of thinking just comes from hope and people just wishing that, I'm going to make it to 80. I'm 22 or something like that. So I plan on being 80, but without the proper steps, you might wind up being 80, but still, hating it and not enjoying it. So next, I want to get into what are some of the legal things you can do when you're 25 or around 25, and why does that really shape how we look at 25-year-olds? Are they fully functional adults by then, or are they underdeveloped adults that need grace and they're still young and stupid? So here's a breakdown of the legal capabilities of a 25-year-old in the USA. So generally, you got to be 18, but some of these will be specifically for 25-year-olds. So at 25, you can vote, you can sign contracts, you can get a lease or a loan or employment agreements, you can join the military, you can get jury duty, you have financial independence, meaning you can open a bank account, get credit cards, and all that stuff. You can actually do that right out of college. Healthcare decisions, you can make your own decisions in the hospital. Education records, you can control all your education records. You can get married without parental consent. You can own and sell property like real estate and vehicles. You can get sued or sue somebody. You can create a will. You can get tattoos and piercings without a parent. Get a passport. You can get a driver's license. And you can own a gun. All at 25. And then this is a few things that are specific to like maybe 21 and up, but the other things, you can be 18 generally, but 21 and up, you can drink alcohol, buy tobacco and weed. You can rent a car. You can gamble, and you can get federal job training and benefits. And then specifically to 25-year-olds, you can run for the United States House of Representatives, and you are affected by the Federal Age Discrimination in Employment Act, so we can't discriminate you. And then there are some benefits that you get for just being 25. And I think that when we read this list, it just seems like, oh yeah, that just makes sense. But if we go back to the beginning of this and we realize that a lot of people believe that you're not making executive functions like reasoning and decision making at 25, then we have to really consider that list I just read and why it is so I'm not gonna say vast. It's not a big list I read, but it is a very important list. Like there are a lot of things on there that can change a 20 something year old's life. But particularly, we kind of give this weird mindset that they're young and incapable of making these decisions when they're presented to them. So let me know. What do you think? Is this something that you think is a little weird in American entertainment? Do you think 20 somethings, 25-year-olds are fully functional adults and should be treated as such? Or do you think there is some kind of arrested development? Are we holding our 20 something year olds back in order to feel good about their youth? I don't know. Let me know.